Now you mentioned you were now dating a Jewish girl.
Yes, this was my first wife who I wound up marrying in 1984.
And her name?
Was Michelle Birnbaum.
Were your parents pleased with that?
Um, pleased and relieved, absolutely. Pleased and relieved. Yes, yes. Later she had her own issues with my parents. She was a little difficult, but compared to the Christian girl I had been seeing, they were thrilled.
Were they involved now with the wedding planning? And was the wedding here, or where did Michelle live?
She lived in Long Island, and the wedding was in Manhattan.
Were your parents involved in
Yes, my mother, they helped finance it to a great extent, because she didn't have money or parental support, really. And so my parents did a lot in financing. I also provided some money for it.
How did she have parents, or did she have family?
She?
She?
Yeah, she had a mother who was really not entirely sane, and but her father didn't really want anything to do with her, which was kind of disappointing. I had wanted to talk with him. He was an American soldier in World War II, a Jewish guy who had volunteered. He didn't even wait to get drafted because he wanted to go over and kill Nazis. And, so it's kind of disappointing that he was difficult to deal with in many other ways.
Did you ever meet him?
Oh, yes, I met him a few times. Yes, not the most pleasant of experiences.
So the parents who were more involved with the marriage and the family were your parents?
Absolutely. Oh, big time.
And
yes.
How did Michelle get along with your parents?
At first okay, but then, things got more difficult for some reason. It's kind of difficult to talk about, but she wound up developing a mental illness, and with this mental illness, it was symptomatic. She became very difficult with my parents, sometimes almost shrilly screaming with them, which presented a great difficulty for me, as you can imagine, because I didn't want my parents to have any pain or suffering, and I certainly was not screaming at my parents, and could not stand the thought of her doing this. It was a difficult time in many ways.
Did you feel your parents were supportive of you going through this?
As things deteriorated, and they deteriorated over the span of a few years. We were married almost 15 years. But as things deteriorated, and it was a slow deterioration, my parents were very supportive of me. But they always reached out to her too. They took whatever verbal abuse was hoisted on them. And as you can imagine, as a husband, trying to balance out and keep both sides. It was very difficult, but my parents, would take it and reach out to her, to the best they could. When things were finally done, my father's, said, thank God you did this, you did the right thing.
So he supported your decision to divorce?
Yeah, in fact, by the end of it, she had really become acutely ill by that point, and again, it manifested itself in an anger directed towards me. And I already had my oldest child at that point, who had become the center of my life in terms of trying to protect her. And I just remember my father one day, they were up visiting in Albany. They used to come a lot when they were younger and stronger, even into their 70s. And
did they drive then?
No, they took the train. They'd never driven. They'd never learned to drive. And but I do remember, it's kind of pertinent for our talk here. I do remember my father telling me, he says, Arnie, this is your Auschwitz. And I'm going, wow, and I understood what he was saying. Of course, at one point I'm saying, no, it's not my Auschwitz, because I had never could never be in Auschwitz, and I could never suffer like you've suffered. I could, to approximate anything to that, in one way is ludicrous, right? I mean, it's impossible. It's different dimensions, different, I mean, it's unfathomable. But yet in another way, I understood what he was saying, that if in life everybody has the one or two things that become very difficult or impossible to deal with, that cause you great pain, that cause you great suffering, the one thing that you have to suffer through and resolve or triumph over, staying strong, remaining a good parent, a good father to my oldest daughter Joelle, had become, key. So if this was my Auschwitz, I did understand what he meant.
And he was showing a tremendous empathy for you.
Yeah,
he really
that's very
was.
true. Amazing.
Let me just ask what year your daughter was born.
My oldest Joelle was born in 1990.
We were talking about the empathy that your father showed to you by saying that he really understood how much you were suffering.
Yes.
How did that make you feel at the time? What do you think about that now?
Oh, it's just amazing. Just to see his level of understanding. He, growing up, I had never been that close to him. Obviously, he had worked many, many hours every day. When he was home on Sundays, he'd get so angry cleaning the house, because the house was a wreck with two boys in a two-bedroom apartment. He would scream and the walls seemed like they shook. So it was a little hard to talk to him. We talked during dinner, and he loved me. He was always hugging and kissing me, of course, and he never hit me once. Never could hit me. And, just to realize that this is the way he could think about this, that, as you just said a moment ago, that he doesn't, that it wasn't about him, it was about me and my suffering, and that he could personalize it and, connect it to his own experience, even though, as I said, it's completely, out of the question that, I could suffer anything to the extent of, concentration camp victim or survivor. It just made an amazing impression on me. I would have to say it was probably at that point where in my life I realized my father was my best friend. And it didn't take anything away from my love of my mother and my closeness with her. She was great. We always used to laugh and joke and everything, and she was wonderful too. They're both incredible, but just, and you get a more of appreciation as you mature and you realize where they're really at. You see their idiosyncrasies and where maybe they're not perfect, but you also see the other part of them. You see this amazing strength, this amazing humor, this amazing drive to live and go on. It's also, I guess, when my father became my hero.
You would always try to protect them from suffering and seeing them as needing protection,
Yeah.
and now you began to see them as having strength.
Exactly. I don't know if it was, again, a part of the times, but I had always seen them more as victims than anything else, and I don't think I got to this point, but I could, maybe he felt it too, but at that time in the 60s and 70s, it was almost a shame in being connected to the Holocaust. There was, not that I would ever even think that way, but, why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you tell them to go screw themselves? Why didn't you do something? Why did you just go? And then only then you realize as you mature, he's there with his parents, and he's got his younger sister in tow, and my mother is hiding as a 17-year-old. What the hell's a 17-year-old girl gonna do? And then you realize how they fought back, how they resisted, what kind of personal strength they had, that after everything they went through, they could get married, have a family, and raise children. you know, and just, I would be freaking insane. You know, I don't know. I could never do this.
So now you got divorced. Did you have custody of your child?
Yes,
You were raising your daughter?
Yes, I was raising my daughter and got sole custody of my daughter, and which was a blessing, you know. And, you know, she was at a Jewish school, something that was very important to me, you know, Jewish day school, and kind of in accordance with my parents' wishes. And, you know, so things were good, but, you know, I was pretty lonely, you know, and, you know, in that sense. And my mother recognized that. She said, Arnie, it's not good for you to be alone, you know, and not good for you to be alone. And it was not long after that, again, my daughter was like in, I can't remember, 3rd or 4th grade, Joelle was, and I was coaching basketball at the school. It's called Hebrew Academy of the Capital District, and I began to get friendly with the mom of a girl who was on my basketball team. And, you know, nothing from nothing, right? You know. And it was only later that she wound up separating and ultimately divorcing her husband. And this was ultimately the woman, her name is Julie Nordwind, now Julie Nordwind Adler, who I'm now married to.
And so she had a daughter, how much younger than Joelle?
She had a daughter that was about a year and a half younger. Her name is Brianna Phillips, and she's a year and a half younger than Joelle. So if Joelle, I can't remember what year it was, if Joelle was in 4th grade and Brianna was in 3rd grade, or Joelle was in 5th and Brianna was in 4th, I can't.
Well, what year did you get married?
We got married in 2002, July 2002.
And how old were the girls then?
The girls, Joelle, boy, I'm terrible with math.
What year was she born?
She was born 1990, thank you, and it's pretty easy, 1990, so she was about 11 or 12.
Yes, and,
Yeah.
and
Brianna
would
was,
have been about
if
10.
Brianna was born 1992, then she was about 9 or 10, yeah. Yeah.
So now you had 2 little girls.
And a boy.
Oh, she had.
Yes, there's Alex Phillips, Alexander Zachary Phillips, and he's the one boy, and he was either in kindergarten or 1st grade. He was such a cute little kid, and you know, so I have a boy. It was kind of a massive impact for Joelle, going from an only child right away to all of a sudden having 2 siblings.
Mm. Now, did you have? How did you keep your home in terms of Judaism?
Oh, very strong. At that point, we were going to synagogue every Shabbat, every Sabbath, and you know, we would mark Sabbath in the house. You know, at that point, all 3 of the older kids were going to Hebrew Academy. I say older kids because subsequently there are more.
Oh.
But
so when were they born?
Sivan Chava Adler was born in 2004. On
So
June
6 years
4th,
old?
Yeah. Yeah, so she's 6 now. And Gavriela Mayan Adler, or Gavi, was born April 17th, 2006.
4 years old.
4 years old, yes, yes. And, you know,
That's
so,
nice.
yes, it's nice because it kind of unified the entire family, having the 2 little ones together.
So, on your wife's side, did she have parents?
She unfortunately lost her mother at the age of 50, when her mother was 50, to, and I can never pronounce this, it's the cancer associated with asbestos.
Mesothelioma?
Correct, yes, yes. And, you know, so I never had the privilege or opportunity to meet her. She was born even before, her name was Barbara Nordwind, Barbara Cohn Nordwind, and she ultimately never had the opportunity to meet any of her grandchildren. Brianna is named for her.
Mm. So she had a father, though. You knew her father?
Yes, yes. Her father, Willie Nordwin Jr., and Willie Nordwin Jr. now lives with us.
Oh, full
Welcome,
house. So how did your parents feel about this marriage, and how did they get along with Willie? And
That's a very timely question. First of all, they absolutely adore Julie. You know, they realize that Julie and I have, you know, and we've been married now more than 8 years, you know, are, you know, perfectly suited to each other, you know, like bread and butter kind of thing. And so they love her very, very dearly. They took her in immediately, you know. While I should say, you know, being the kind of persons that they are, still giving a kind ear to Michelle if she'd ever call them, you know, to my first wife.
Does she continue?
Occasionally, you know, occasionally. It depends on her mental state and stuff like that, but occasionally she will call them, and my parents continue to, at least in that extent, to be welcoming to her. You know, they can't understand the whole, at this point, Michelle's father does not speak to her. And the mother, again, is not fully sane. And they, you know, I think from their own experience, they can't imagine a father not being willing to talk to a daughter. How could anybody do that?
Right.
You know, it doesn't make any sense to me either. I couldn't imagine this. But, so they continue to lend her an open ear, you know. But yet they, you know, fully adopted Julie as, you know, their daughter.
And do they enjoy having all 5 grandchildren?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, you know, I mean, the teenagers, you know, they kind of do their own thing, and, you know, you know, Joelle, who had more time to bond with my parents when they were younger and healthier, you know, was certainly able to, you know, now, you know, sees them a little more often than Brianna and Alex, but you know, my parents love Brianna and Alex as well, very much, you know, and, you know, and of course they're, you know, absolutely crazy over the 2 little ones.
Now your brother, where does he live?
My brother, it's kind of a sore subject, unfortunately. My brother lives in Dobbs Ferry, which is about 10 miles north of here, and he, for some reason, which I still find very difficult to understand, has a very limited relationship with my parents, which is probably, I unfortunately do not have a very good relationship with my brother, probably motivated to a large extent by the fact that I don't think he's good to my parents. And again, this is something I've tried to understand. I don't, I think I understand it, but I don't accept it. You know, I just recently saw there was a show on the Sundance channel. I don't know if you've ever seen this, called Children of the Sun. And it was about children back in the 50s growing up on kibbutz in Israel. And they lived in a kind of a, you know, in this socialist environment where the kids didn't live with the parents. They lived in youth housing in their own building, you know. And while my parents would, you know, so my brother was 6 years older, so before we came to America, he lived in this youth housing for 6 or 7 years. And I think, you know, based on what this program said about a lot of kids in that situation, they never bonded with their parents. And I think that may have been the case with my brother. He never really bonded with my parents. He has never... my parents' experience during Hashoah, during the Holocaust, are integral to my life. In fact, it might be one of the defining... the events in this world that has defined the way I view things or who I am, you know? And he never... he's never, you know, he heard the same stories I heard, but never took it any farther than that. And at this point doesn't have a deep relationship. Yuda, if you ever hear this and somehow we reconcile, please accept my apologies for saying this. I hope that one day what I'm saying now is not true, no longer the case.
What about, does he have children?
Yes, he has 2 children.
Do they see their grandparents?
They have a son, David, who's almost 30 now, who does not see them much. They used to see each other a lot more when they were younger. And they have a daughter, Cheryl, who's in college. I believe she's, probably she's a year or 2 older than Joelle, so she's probably 21 or 22 now. And she has come a few times to see my parents. In fact, when my father was in critical condition a few years ago at the Allen Pavilion Hospital, Cheryl came with my brother to see her, and that meant a lot to my father.
So Yuta does see them on occasion, but isn't that close?
Very rarely. Very rarely does he come to see them, and very rarely does he call them on the phone.
So you're the one that sort of helps them.
I'm the one who helps them. I'm the one responsible for I'm their health proxy, their financial person. I'm the one who deals with the social worker and the doctors and the medicine and whatever issues come up at the Hebrew home.
Right.
I'm the one.
Now, you mentioned you have 2 daughters in college. Where
Yes.
are they going?
My daughter Joelle goes to Hamilton College, which is outside of Utica, and my daughter Brianna goes to Hobart William Smith in Geneva, New York.
Do your 3 younger ones still go to Hebrew Academy?
Alex Phillips is now a 10th grader at Albany High School, which is a public high school, and Sivan and Gabriella now attend the public school, a Montessori magnet school. With such a large family, unfortunately, the tuition was very difficult for us.
Does your wife work?
She works does a number of things. She's a music teacher, and she does video montages. She's very creative and talented. Right now, I think I said something timely before about my father-in-law, because he just moved in a couple of weeks ago. But right now she's spending a lot of time helping him to get settled, supervising some rehabilitation in our house, some construction to make the house handicapped accessible for him. If my parents had needed housing, the door would have been open for them too, but they always had wanted to stay in Riverdale, living in the same community they would have been complete fish out of water up in Albany. But Julie's father needed someplace to be, and I'm a great believer, that one has to, if a parent wants to be with us, we have to accommodate that need.
Now, are you members of a synagogue?
We were previously members of a synagogue. We've taken a little hiatus again from that. We were members of a conservative shul up in Albany. It was a shul we got married in. We love it very much. It's just, we found that right now, first of all, membership was very difficult for us financially. And we've also, when the kids were little, it was kind of difficult going in there for Shabbat services. It was a little, they're a little disruptive.
How have you handled talking to your children about the Holocaust? And do they ask questions?
They don't ask so many questions. I've kind of taken an almost similar approach that my parents kind of took with me. I've, kind of introduced them very slowly to the issues, and it's actually very hard because I don't want them to get too sad, but yet they have to know about it too. I've shown my oldest, Joelle, some pictures, Brianna and Alex a few as well. For little Sivan and Gavi, I've tried to focus on the positive so far. Well, not the positive, but what I've done is I've shown them, I've told them that Saba, which is what they call my father, grandfather in Hebrew, was in a very bad place. and he was a prisoner there, and he was that it was a very bad place. And I've shown them pictures, which I actually have here, of two of the American soldiers who liberated him. So I show them pictures of the cool tanks that came into Ebensee to liberate them. So I've just kind of shown them a few things so far, and
Your older children must have learned something in school.
yes, they learned in school. Actually, in the Jewish school, every Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, they would, they would put on, they'd meet them at the hall was blackened, the lights were off, and they'd make them put on a star, which the first time I heard about that, I got very upset. I said, my mother tore her star off. I don't want you putting a yellow star on my kid. But
Did you tell them
I
that
did
in
not.
school?
No, I did not. I said this more to myself. I restrained myself. I understood the message they were making. I also understood that, my kids, at the age they were not, integrated in that manner anyway. So, it wasn't going to cause them the trauma that it probably caused me thinking about it.
Did they ever relate this to your parents?
That somebody put a yellow star on
Or
my kids?
that what they were learning in school about the Holocaust related to your parents?
Not really. No, not that I recollect. Again, Joelle had spent the most time with them, and I don't think my parents. As much as my father was taught at a certain point, by the mid-1990s, by the time, say, Joelle was 5, my father was taught, after the interview at Adler Israel and, the conservative synagogue in which you conducted the interview, and some other things we did together to mark his time in Ebensee, which I can tell you about.